everyone, and welcome to today's science video where we are going to be talking about food chains. And so to start with a basic definition, so what is a food chain? A food chain is a linear sequence of organisms through which nutrients and energy pass as one organism eats another. And so there are two types of organisms which make up food chains. Every organism within a food chain is determined to be either a producer or a consumer. So a producer, also known as an autotroph, makes their own organic molecules, whereas a consumer, also known as a heterotroph, gets organic molecules by eating other organisms. In a food chain, each organism occupies a different trophic level, which is defined by how many energy transfers separate it from the basic input of the chain. So the basic input is your producers at the bottom, and then one energy transfer will get you to the next trophic level, 2 to the next, 3 to the next, and each energy transfer gets you another trophic level up. And now these different trophic levels within the food chain all have different names and definitions of their own. So that's what we're going to look at next. At the base of the food chain lies the primary producers. The primary producers are autotrophs and are most often photosynthetic organisms such as plants or algae. And so those primary producers make up our first trophic level. Our second trophic level is our primary consumers. Primary consumers are usually herbivores or plant eaters, though they may be algae eaters or bacteria eaters as well. So one more trophic level up, making our third trophic level, will be our secondary consumers. Organisms that eat primary consumers are called secondary consumers. These are generally meat eaters, which we call carnivores. A great example of these are a lot of types of fish are secondary consumers. Then the organisms which eat secondary consumers are called tertiary consumers. These are carnivores eating other carnivores. Eagles are a great example of a tertiary consumer. Some food chains even have additional levels, such as quaternary consumers, which are carnivores that eat tertiary consumers. And organisms at the very top of the food chain are called apex consumers. That was a lot of definitions, and it can be a lot to understand how they all fit together, what can be which type of consumer and producers and all of that. So I am going to go through an example and explain how each organism is what type of consumer or producer and what trophic level they are in. So in this example, we are starting with grass. Grass is, in this example, our primary producer. That's because they are a photosynthetic plant. They are creating their own organic molecules, and so that makes them an autotroph or a producer, which makes them part of our first trophic level. Then, in this example, we have a grasshopper. Grasshoppers eat grass, and therefore, our grasshoppers act as our primary consumers, which makes them part of our second trophic level. So up next in this example is the frog, and the frog is eating the grasshopper, making it a secondary consumer. It is a meat eater because it is eating our primary consumer, making it a carnivore. This makes the frog part of the third trophic level. Next in this example is a python. The python eats the frog. That makes it a organism which is eating a secondary consumer, which, if you remember, makes the python a tertiary consumer because it's a carnivore eating another carnivore. And finally, in this example, the eagle is a quaternary consumer because it is eating a tertiary consumer. Also, because it's at the top of this food chain, the eagle could be considered the apex consumer as well. For some additional practice, what I'm going to do is I'm going to list off 5 organisms which live within the same food chain. I'm going to give you some time to see if you can identify them as being primary producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and so forth. And then we'll come back, we'll revisit and see if you got the answer right. For this example, we're going to be looking at an ecosystem within the ocean. So what we're going to be looking at here is a fish, a killer whale, some phytoplankton, as well as some crustacea, which an example of that would be small shrimps, and then finally a dolphin. So we have fish, killer whales, phytoplankton, crustacea, and dolphins. So pause the video, come back, see if you sorted them correctly. So now for the answer. So starting with the primary producer, that in this example would be the phytoplankton. That's because these are small organisms which live in the ocean, which are able to make their own organic molecules. That makes them an autotroph, and also known as our primary producers, making it part of the first trophic level. Next, we have our crustacea. Now, you may not know a lot about them, but you could guess by what the other organisms are, that being a smaller organism, that they're going to be eating the phytoplankton and not some of the other larger animals within this food chain. That makes them the primary consumers, making them part of the second trophic level. Then we have the fish. The fish would eat the crustacea like the small shrimp, making them the secondary consumers, part of the third trophic level. Then the dolphins would become the tertiary consumer, eating the fish. The dolphins, being the tertiary consumer, become part of the fourth trophic level. And the killer whale then acts as the apex predator, aka the quaternary consumer, eating the dolphins and occupying the fifth and final trophic level in this example. Thank you all for watching. Now that you've watched this video, you can define food chains, producers, consumers, and all of the different trophic levels. And you can also sort animals within their own food chains. If you're looking for an extra challenge, see if you can identify an ecosystem that we didn't cover within this video and draw your own food chain. That's a great way to apply the knowledge that you learned today. All right, I'll see you next time and keep learning.